At the airport, amidst the hustle of a typical morning, something unusual stirred. Jet, a loyal German Shepherd and K9 partner to Officer Sean, was alert in a way that felt different. As they walked through the bustling terminal, Jet's sharp amber eyes scanned every face, every movement, until one caught his attention. A woman seemingly ordinary was acting strange, drawing Jet's instincts into overdrive. Sean trusted his partner's judgment above all else, but today Jet's behavior was more intense than usual. Was it just another routine patrol, or was something much darker unfolding? Watch to uncover the truth that Jet sniffed out first. You won't believe what happened next. It was just another bustling morning at the international airport. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow through the high windows of the terminal. Inside, the usual rhythm of travel played out. Suitcases rolling across the shiny floors, the soft chatter of passengers, and the occasional overhead announcement. The air smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee, mingling with the sterile scent of polished floors and metal. The crowd moved in waves, travelers from all over the world, with their luggage checking in at counters or hurrying towards their gates. The buzz of the airport was comforting in its familiarity, like a well-rehearsed play that never seemed to change. But for those working behind the scenes, the routine was always a reminder to stay vigilant. Among the crowd, Sean, a seasoned police officer, moved with practiced ease. He had been with the force for over a decade, and his presence in the terminal was just another part of the airport's invisible security net. His uniform was crisp, his boots clicking softly as he walked beside his loyal companion, Jet. Jet, a large German Shepherd with amber eyes that never missed a thing, was more than just a working dog. He was Sean's partner, his best friend. The bond between them was unspoken, but strong. They had been through countless operations together, from high-stakes raids to routine checks like this one. Each day, they worked seamlessly as a team, anticipating each other's moves without the need for words. Sean gave Jet a quick, affectionate pat on the head as they passed through the terminal. Jet's ears perked up at the touch, his tail wagging in a slow, steady rhythm. He looked up at Sean with those watchful eyes, as if asking, "What's next?" "Easy, boy," Sean muttered under his breath. "Just another patrol." Jet's body language relaxed, but his alertness remained. His nose twitched as he sniffed the air, scanning the crowd for anything out of place. Despite the chaos around them, Jet remained calm, his focus absolute. The world may have seemed chaotic to the average traveler, but to Sean and Jet, it was just another day of keeping things safe. As they moved through the terminal, Sean couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort in Jet's presence. Every step, every turn was familiar. He trusted Jet's instincts more than his own, sometimes knowing that if anything were amiss, Jet would be the first to notice. They walked past the usual crowds, families rushing to catch their flights, businessmen glued to their phones, tourists snapping photos of the bustling terminal. It was a typical morning at the airport, full of life and motion. But for Sean and Jet, it was just another day, on the job keeping watch over the familiar, ever-moving sea of faces. This morning, however, would prove to be far from ordinary. Sean and Jet moved through the terminal, their pace steady and synchronized, while the bustling crowd flowed around them like water. They moved like a single entity, their movements fluid and precise. Jet's amber eyes scanned the crowd, his head turning slightly as he picked up on every scent, every sound. With each passing moment, he was processing more information than most people would even notice. Sean felt the familiar weight of his badge on his chest, a reminder of the responsibility he carried. As he walked beside Jet, his hand rested loosely on the leash, but his focus never wavered. He had been on this beat for years, but it still felt like a constant challenge to stay vigilant. The airport may have seemed like a routine place, but it was full of potential danger hidden beneath the surface of everyday interactions. Sean trusted Jet's instincts more than he trusted his own sometimes. Jet was always the first to pick up on something out of place. They passed the usual checkpoints, with Jet moving with a grace that belied his size. His muscles rippled under his sleek coat, and his nose twitched as he sniffed the air. He was constantly on alert, his body tense but controlled. Every new scent, every subtle shift in the crowd was processed immediately. His ears flicked at the faintest sound, his eyes locking onto anyone who seemed out of the ordinary. It was clear to Sean that Jet was doing more than just walking through the terminal. He was working as always. Sean's mind wandered for a brief moment, as it often did during these routine patrols. He had been on this job long enough to know how to blend in to keep his eyes and ears open without drawing attention to himself. But sometimes the monotony of it all weighed on him. The endless hours of surveillance, the daily walks through the same halls, the familiar faces passing by. Sometimes he wondered if there was more to his job than just keeping things in check. But he pushed the thought aside. This was what he was trained for, what he had dedicated his life to. No matter how routine it felt, there was always the chance that something, or someone, would slip through the cracks. Jet's growl broke him from his thoughts, and Sean immediately straightened his attention, snapping back to the task at hand. Jet had stopped walking, his posture rigid. He was focused on a woman near the far side of the terminal, a lone traveler pushing a cart filled with bags. Jet's body language was subtle but telling. His tail stiffened, and his ears flattened slightly as his eyes tracked the woman's every movement. Sean glanced at Jet, then back at the woman. Nothing about her stood out to most people. She was wearing dark sunglasses, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, a beige trench coat draped over her shoulders. She looked like any other business traveler in the airport, but something in the way she moved caught Jet's attention. Her steps were too calculated, her eyes darting around, avoiding any direct contact with those around her. It was the kind of behavior that could easily be dismissed by the untrained eye, but not by Jet. "Easy, boy," Sean muttered under his breath, but Jet didn't relax. The dog's eyes never left the woman. Sean's hand tightened slightly on the leash. He trusted Jet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that today might be different. He had been through hundreds of routine patrols, but today something felt off. The way Jet's instincts flared, the sharpness in his growl. It was more than just routine vigilance. Something was about to break the calm. As they moved closer, Jet's behavior became even more pronounced. The woman, sensing the attention, shifted her weight uncomfortably. Her fingers tightened around her bag as she quickly moved toward a quieter corner of the terminal. Sean's eyes narrowed. "Jet, stay," he whispered, his voice low but firm. Jet growled again, a low rumble in his chest. He was ready to act, but Sean needed to wait. He wasn't sure why, but he knew this wasn't just another false alarm. Not today. Sean stood still for a moment, assessing the situation. The woman's odd behavior, Jet's reaction. Something was happening. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make him pause. He had learned to trust his gut over the years, and right now, his instincts were telling him to keep watching, to stay alert. And just as quickly as the tension had appeared, the moment passed. The woman continued to walk toward her gate, seemingly unaware that she had been under surveillance the whole time. Sean's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his mind was still racing. Whatever was going on, he wasn't about to let his guard down. The terminal buzzed with the usual noise of travelers hurrying to their gates. Jet and Sean moved through the crowd as steady as ever until a sudden shift in the atmosphere caught Sean's attention. His gaze followed a woman entering the security checkpoint area. She was tall, wearing a navy blue coat and dark sunglasses, her hair tucked neatly into a ponytail. At first glance, she appeared to be just another traveler. Nothing to stand out. But something about her felt off. She was clutching her purse tightly, moving quickly, almost too quickly for someone who was supposed to be casually making their way through an airport. Her posture was stiff, and her eyes constantly darted around, avoiding direct contact with anyone. Sean's instincts, honed over years of experience, kicked in immediately. He looked over at Jet, who had stopped walking entirely, his body frozen in place. Sean's hand tightened around the leash. "Jet, stay," he whispered, trying to keep his voice calm. But the dog wasn't listening. Jet was focused, his nose, twitching eyes locked on the woman, as if he could sense something the rest of the world could not. For a moment, the woman seemed oblivious to the attention she was attracting. She stepped up to the security line, handing over her boarding pass with a slight tremor in her hands. But then, as if triggered by some unseen signal, Jet let out a sharp bark. It was sudden, loud, and jarring, cutting through the noise of the terminal. Heads turned. Passengers stopped in their tracks, looking around in confusion. But Jet's focus never wavered. "Easy, boy," Sean muttered under his breath, trying to calm Jet down. But the dog wasn't backing down. His growls grew louder, more urgent. There was a desperation in his barks, as if he was trying to communicate something far more dangerous than an ordinary threat. The woman froze. Her face paled and her grip on her purse tightened. She took a small, hesitant step back, her eyes wide with fear, but she did nothing to calm the situation. Instead, she continued to clutch her bag against her stomach, looking at Jet with an expression of deep concern, almost as if she was trying to keep something hidden. Sean's eyes narrowed as he watched Jet's reaction. The dog had never behaved like this before, not in a crowded airport full of distractions. He had faced down bomb threats, explosives, and even armed suspects. But this was different. Jet wasn't reacting with the calm, measured focus that came with a typical search. This was something else entirely. There was an urgency in his movements, a need to protect. Sean could feel it. Something's not right, Sean thought to himself, his heart rate quickening as he moved a step closer. Jet's barks grew more frantic as the woman stepped back once more, now inching closer to the corner of the terminal, clearly trying to avoid drawing more attention. The crowd had begun to murmur their uneasy glances, shifting between Jet and the woman, unsure of what was happening. But the tension in the air was palpable. Even the most oblivious passenger could sense that something was wrong. Sean's mind raced. The woman's strange behavior, Jet's powerful reaction. This wasn't a coincidence. "Stay close, Jet," Sean whispered, keeping his movements controlled. He was about to act, but first he needed more information. Jet's body was tense, his muscles coiled, ready to spring into action. But Sean held him back. The dog was always right. And this time something was telling him to wait just a little longer. As the woman made a move towards the exit, Jet let out one last powerful bark, louder than before. It was a warning, sharp and unmistakable. Sean's instincts flared. This was not just a false alarm. The woman's attempts to blend in to avoid attention only added to the growing suspicion. "Not on my watch," Sean murmured under his breath. The tension in the terminal reached its peak as Jet's barking grew louder, more frantic. His entire body was coiled, every muscle taut, as he fixated on the woman, his eyes never leaving her. It was as if the world around him had faded away, and all that mattered was her. His bark echoed off the high ceilings, a sharp and insistent warning that could not be ignored. Sean's hand tightened on the leash, but Jet was no longer listening. The dog's instincts had overridden any command he might issue. Without warning, Jet lunged forward, his powerful frame surging ahead, his paws skidding against the smooth airport floor as he chased after the woman. "Jet, stop!" Sean shouted, but it was too late. The dog was already in motion, his focus laser-sharp on the woman who was now backing up in a panic, her eyes wide with fear. The crowd parted quickly, murmuring in confusion and concern, as Jet advanced on the woman, his growls low and threatening. The woman's face turned pale as she fumbled with her purse, her eyes darting around desperately. She took several quick steps back, almost stumbling as she raised one hand in an attempt to calm the dog. "Please make him stop," she cried out, her voice trembling. "I haven't done anything wrong." Sean's heart pounded as he sprinted forward, his eyes locked on the woman and Jet. The situation was escalating fast, and he had to get control of his partner before it spiraled further. But Jet was relentless. He stopped just short of the woman, his body still poised for action, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. His growls deepened, vibrating through the terminal, as if he could sense something the rest of them could not. Jet heel, Sean commanded, his voice firm, but the dog remained still, focused entirely on the woman. It was clear that something was wrong. Jet wasn't reacting to her like any other person. This wasn't just a normal security alert. There was something deeper. Something that Sean couldn't yet put his finger on. The woman's breath quickened, her panic rising. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I'm just trying to board my flight. Please, you have to understand. I haven't done anything wrong." The more she spoke, the more Sean's suspicions grew. Her words didn't match her behavior. Her frantic tone seemed rehearsed, too measured, as if she were trying too hard to convince everyone around her. Every step she took, every motion she made, only deepened the mystery. Sean's eyes flicked to Jet, whose posture remained tense and ready. "I need you to calm down," Sean said, stepping closer to the woman. His gaze shifted back to Jet. "Jet, come here, boy." But still, Jet didn't move. The dog's eyes were locked on the woman's midsection, his instincts screaming at him. The woman continued to back away, her hands shaking as she clutched her purse even tighter. "Please," she repeated, almost pleading. "I'm pregnant. I can't do anything. I just want to get on my plane. I haven't done anything wrong." I swear Sean's mind raced. The more she spoke, the more the pieces didn't add up. Jet had never reacted like this to someone before, especially someone who appeared so harmless. Her behavior, her words, they didn't match the calm and innocent appearance she was trying to project. But just as Sean was about to get closer and reassess, another officer appeared, rushing to the scene. "What's going on here?" the officer asked, his voice tense with confusion. "She's lying," Sean said, his voice steady despite the situation. "There's something wrong with her. Jet's instincts don't lie." The woman's face twisted with fear, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse to her chest. "I told you I'm pregnant," she cried again. "Please, you have to believe me." But her plea fell on deaf ears. The situation had already escalated too much. Sean knew something was off, and the rest of the officers around them sensed it too. The woman was more than just a passenger. There was something hidden beneath her calm exterior. Whatever Jet had sensed, Sean was about to find out. As the officers moved in to inspect her more closely, the air around them grew heavier, charged with the intensity of the moment. The crowd, still confused, watched from a distance, whispering to each other. Some passengers began recording the scene, unsure of what was happening, while others backed away, creating a small circle around the unfolding drama. Sean looked at Jet, his partner in crime prevention, his instincts telling him that this was just the beginning. The tension in the terminal was suffocating. Sean stood a few steps back, his eyes fixed on the woman, who was now visibly shaken, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The officers around them were still trying to make sense of the situation. But Sean knew there was more beneath the surface. Jet's behavior had been clear. This wasn't a typical false alarm. Something was hidden, and it was up to him and his partner to find it. Sean stepped forward, his gaze narrowing as he focused on the woman. "We need to inspect your bags," he said, his voice calm but firm. His tone left no room for argument. The woman recoiled slightly, her eyes wide with fear. "No, you can't," she protested, her voice trembling. "I already told you I'm pregnant. Please don't do this." But Sean wasn't swayed by her pleading. He nodded to one of the other officers, signaling them to begin the search. Meanwhile, Jet's stance grew more rigid, his nose twitching as he focused on the woman's bag. His eyes locked onto the leather purse she was clutching so desperately against her chest. With each passing second, Jet's growls grew louder, more insistent. It was as if he knew that whatever was hidden inside that bag was the key to unraveling the mystery. "Easy boy," Sean muttered, but Jet's eyes remained fixed on the purse, and his growl became more intense. The dog's instincts were unwavering, and Sean trusted them completely. It was clear now that Jet wasn't just reacting to a suspicious person. Jet had detected something dangerous. The officers began to move closer, their hands steady but cautious. Sean could feel the growing unease in the air as the crowd continued to watch. Passengers whispered among themselves, some filming the scene on their phones. Others simply backing away, sensing the impending conflict. But there was no turning back now. As the officers moved to check the woman's bags, the air seemed to thicken, charged with the weight of the moment. The woman's face had drained of color, her eyes darting around, looking for a way out. But there was no escape. Sean and his team were closing in. "Please, you don't understand," she cried, her voice cracking. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just need to get home." She started backing away, almost tripping over her own feet. Her voice had become a desperate plea, but Sean wasn't buying it. He had seen enough to know that her actions were anything but innocent. There was something wrong, and Jet was the one who had seen it first. The officers stepped in hands, raised in a calm, controlled manner, but the woman was now visibly shaking. "I'm pregnant, I swear," she repeated, her tone frantic. She dropped her purse to the floor and tried to take a step back, but Jet was already moving toward it, his body language more aggressive than before. Sean moved in quickly, crouching to stop Jet from getting too close to the purse. "Jet, sit," he ordered sharply. But the dog remained fixated, his body tense, his nostrils flaring as he continued to circle the bag. There was something in there, something Jet had identified long before anyone else had. The tension in the air was thick with the anticipation of what they might find. "Search the bag," Sean said to the officer next to him, his voice calm but urgent. "Now." The officer opened the purse carefully, revealing a few personal items, lipstick receipts, a few crumpled tissues. But something felt off. The weight of the purse was wrong. It wasn't just the typical contents you'd expect from a woman traveling. There was a strange bulge at the bottom, hidden beneath the tissues and makeup. Sean's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. His instincts told him they were on the verge of uncovering something far bigger than they could have imagined. "Get the backup," Sean ordered. His eyes never left the bag. He knew that once the purse was fully opened, everything would change. Whatever was hidden inside was going to expose the truth. As the officers moved to get additional backup, the woman's fear became more evident. She wasn't trying to run anymore. Instead, she stood there, trembling, her face a mask of desperation. The moment the officer pulled out the last of the tissues and reached for the bulging item, a heavy silence fell over the terminal. Jet's growls ceased for just a moment. The entire room held its breath, waiting for the revelation. The officer hesitated for a moment, staring down at the bulging item in the bottom of the purse. Sean's heart raced as he watched. His instincts had been right. There was something far bigger at play here, something that would explain Jet's strange behavior. The tension in the air thickened, and the crowd around them seemed to grow quieter as everyone waited for the moment the bag would be opened completely. As the officer pulled out the final tissue, he reached for the object that had caused the bulge. The moment the item came into view, Sean's gut twisted. It wasn't the soft, familiar shape of a phone or a wallet. It was something else entirely. Something hard-shaped, almost like a stomach, its edges sewn with a crude but deliberate pattern. The woman stiffened, her eyes wide with panic as she saw the officer pulling it out. "No, that's just... Please, you have to understand, it's just a mistake," she cried, her voice breaking. Sean's mind flashed to Jet's reaction. The way the dog had been focused on her midsection, the urgency in his barks. It all made sense now. The officer handed the item to another officer for further inspection. The item was heavy, made of some rubber-like material, and there were strange seams running along it. It resembled a prosthetic belly, something designed to mimic the appearance of a pregnant woman. Sean's eyes narrowed. His suspicions were starting to form, but the pieces weren't quite coming together. Something was off about this whole situation, and it was more than just a simple case of suspicious behavior. Jet had been right all along. There was something dangerous hidden here. Ma'am, Sean began, his voice firm but calm. "This is not what you're telling us." He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on her. "What is this?" The woman's lips quivered, and she looked like she might break down at any second. But her response came out in a rush filled with panic. "I swear I didn't know it was going to be like this. I didn't want to. Please, you have to believe me." Sean didn't respond right away. Instead, he motioned to the officer holding the prosthetic belly. "Get the team. We need to check this thoroughly." The officer nodded and moved off to gather additional resources. Sean stood there assessing the woman, who was visibly shaken. Her story was unraveling, and the more she spoke, the less it made sense. She claimed she was pregnant, but that was clearly a lie. Sean looked down at Jet, who remained focused, his body tense as he stood beside his handler. Jet's eyes never wavered from the woman. The dog had been trying to tell them something, and now it was clear what it was. This wasn't just about a false pregnancy. It was something much more dangerous. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. "We need to do a full security check on her belongings, now." The urgency in the officer's voice heightened Sean's sense of unease. As the officers began to search the rest of the woman's belongings, Jet's attention was drawn again to her purse. He began to nudge it with his nose, his growls low but persistent. It was clear Jet was still detecting something. Sean crouched down beside the dog, his hand resting on Jet's head, offering a reassuring touch. "What is it, boy?" he muttered, watching as Jet continued to point at the purse. The woman's fear was palpable now. "Please just let me go. I have a child to care for." "I didn't do anything wrong," she cried, shaking uncontrollably. But her desperate pleas were falling on deaf ears. Sean could see that Jet had already figured out more than they had. Sean's heart beat faster. There was more to this story than a fake pregnancy. This was far from a simple case of deception. The woman was hiding something far worse, something dangerous that could harm others. The prosthetic belly wasn't just a disguise. It was part of something much bigger. "Whatever this is," Sean said, his voice steady, "it's not just smuggling. This is serious." Jet's growl grew more intense, his nose twitching as he sniffed around the woman's purse, once again pressing his face into it with urgency. He wasn't just warning them anymore. He was telling them they were close to uncovering the truth. Sean felt the weight of the moment. They were getting closer to unraveling the mystery, but the true danger was still hidden. What had Jet uncovered, and what was inside that bag? Sean stood still, his eyes never leaving Jet as the dog continued to press his snout into the woman's purse. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of the moment sinking in. The woman's pleas grew more desperate, but Sean's focus was on Jet's every move. He could feel the dog's urgency, and it only confirmed what he had already suspected. This was not just a simple case of deceit. The officers around them were still trying to process the situation, but Sean was already one step ahead. He could sense that they were on the brink of something much larger than they realized. The prosthetic belly, the woman's erratic behavior, everything pointed to something deeper. "Let's take another look," Sean muttered, moving in closer as the officer reached for the purse again. The woman's eyes darted around the terminal, her panic growing. She could sense that the walls were closing in. Sean motioned to the officers to be careful, watching closely as the bag was unzipped. Inside, beneath the makeup and crumpled receipts, there were more signs of something much more sinister. The officers pulled out the prosthetic belly first, its unnatural rubbery texture making it clear that this was no ordinary disguise. But as they dug deeper into the bag, they found something even more alarming. A small pouch with a metallic sheen and what appeared to be small vials inside. Sean's pulse quickened. The pouch was tightly sealed, and the vials inside looked nothing like the medical supplies the woman had claimed to be carrying. They looked like chemicals. The realization hit Sean hard. This wasn't just a false pregnancy. It was a sophisticated smuggling operation. "Get a hazmat team here now." Sean ordered, his voice calm but commanding. He turned to the woman, his eyes narrowing. "You're not just smuggling drugs, are you? This goes far beyond that." The woman's face twisted with fear. "I didn't know," she whispered, almost to herself. "They told me it was just medicine, just to get through the checkpoint." Sean shook his head. "You knew exactly what you were doing. This isn't just about getting past security. This is about trafficking." As the officers carefully examined the contents of the pouch, Jet continued to sniff at the purse, his growls growing more intense. The dog was relentless in his pursuit, his nose twitching as he uncovered even more hidden compartments. It wasn't just the vials. Jet was indicating that there was more, something even deeper within the bag. Sean watched closely as the officers began to inspect the prosthetic belly more thoroughly. The seams were delicate, expertly sewn together. And as they peeled back the layers, they discovered an intricate network of small containers embedded inside. This wasn't a simple fake pregnancy. This was a sophisticated contraption designed to carry something valuable, something dangerous. This was made to carry drugs. One of the officers said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's a full-on trafficking system." Sean nodded grimly. "It's not just a disguise, it's a whole operation. Whoever is behind this knows exactly what they're doing." Jet let out another low growl, his body still tense. He hadn't stopped his search, and the more the officers uncovered, the more intense Jet became. His instincts were telling them that the woman was only the tip of the iceberg. There was more, so much more, that they hadn't uncovered yet. Sean crouched down next to Jet, his mind racing. He was no stranger to high-risk situations. But this was different. This wasn't a lone criminal at the airport. This was part of a much larger operation. And it was clear now that the woman wasn't just a victim. She was a pawn in a dangerous game. "Keep looking, Jet," Sean said quietly, his voice full of determination. "We're close to finding everything." Jet's growls softened, but his focus remained unshaken. As the officers continued their inspection, Sean knew that they were on the verge of uncovering something even bigger than they had imagined. This wasn't just about one woman, one smuggling attempt. This was a network, a system that would take everything they had to dismantle. As the officers continued to search the woman's belongings, Sean's thoughts raced. The more they uncovered, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. What they had originally thought was a simple smuggling operation was quickly revealing itself to be part of something far larger, something more sinister. The prosthetic belly, the carefully concealed drugs, the woman's desperate actions. Everything pointed to a far-reaching international network. Sean's gaze shifted to the woman, whose face was pale and twisted with fear. She stood there, shaking her eyes, darting nervously between the officers and Sean, as if searching for an escape that wasn't there. Her breathing was shallow, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Sean could feel the tension in the air. This wasn't just a woman caught in the act. She was a part of something much darker, something that would have far-reaching consequences. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know it would be like this. They told me I had no choice." Sean's heart sank as the woman's words hit him with an unexpected weight. She wasn't just a smuggler. She was a victim forced into this life by a dangerous criminal network. But the truth was more complicated than that. She had willingly become a part of the operation. She had made a choice, even if it was one born out of fear and desperation. Who are they? Sean asked, his voice steady but firm. He needed answers. The woman's eyes flickered to the ground, her face crumpling with guilt. They promised my son would be safe, she said, her voice cracking. They showed me pictures of him. They told me I had to do this or they'd hurt him. Sean took a deep breath, absorbing the weight of her words. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. This wasn't just a drug smuggling operation. It was a trafficking ring that preyed on vulnerable people, forcing them to carry dangerous cargo under the threat of harm to their families. I didn't want to do it. The woman continued, her tears falling freely now. But they told me I had no choice. They said if I didn't do it, they'd kill him. I had to. He's all I have. Sean's mind raced. He had seen criminals lie and manipulate before, but this was different. This wasn't just greed or ambition. This was manipulation at its most cruel, using fear to control someone's every move. The woman wasn't just smuggling drugs. She was part of a much larger scheme to traffic narcotics internationally, and she had been forced into it by threats that cut deep. Sean glanced at Jet, whose nose was still twitching as he stood alert beside him. The dog's instincts had led them here to this truth. Jet had sensed the danger the woman posed, but he had also sensed her fear. Fear of the very people who had forced her into this life. Tell me everything, Sean urged, his voice softening. Who's behind this? Who's running this operation? The woman's eyes filled with fear, but she knew that she couldn't hide anymore. They go by different names. But the main one, the one who controls everything, is a man named Victor. He runs a private courier service, supposedly transporting medical supplies. But it's all a front. They use women like me, mothers, refugees, anyone desperate enough to carry their packages. They have people at every airport controlling everything from the inside. Sean felt a chill run down his spine. This was no small-time operation. This was an international network, one that was hidden in plain sight. They had used a legitimate business to cover their tracks, moving narcotics across borders without detection. Victor, Sean repeated under his breath, committing the name to memory. How do you contact him? The woman shook her head. I'm not supposed to know. I only meet his people. They gave me a fake ID, a new passport. They told me I was just part of the process, that I'd be paid well. But when I saw what they were doing, it was too late. I couldn't back out. The desperation in her voice was raw, but Sean wasn't fooled. She had made a choice, even if that choice had been forced upon her. And now they had a name, a lead that could bring down the entire operation. Victor's not going to get away with this, Sean said firmly. We'll stop him. The woman trembled, but she nodded as if understanding the gravity of the situation. The weight of her decision, the danger she had placed herself and her son in, was beginning to hit her. She had no choice but to tell Sean everything. But as the officers continued to investigate, Jet was still focused. His growls had stopped, but his body was tense, still alert. There was more to uncover, and Sean knew that Jet wasn't finished yet. Sean turned to the officers around him, his mind already racing ahead. The woman had given them the key to dismantling the network, but they were far from done. They needed to move quickly. If Victor was as dangerous as the woman said, they couldn't afford to waste any time. Sean stood with the officers, his mind working in overdrive as they carefully examined the prosthetic belly. What they had first thought was just an elaborate disguise was quickly proving to be something far more dangerous. As the officers cut away the fake layers, what they found underneath made Sean's stomach churn. The prosthetic was designed to look like a pregnant belly with the seams perfectly stitched to mimic the curvature of a woman in her second trimester. But as they peeled back the layers, they found hidden compartments, small discrete sections filled with metallic containers. The officers carefully removed them, their eyes widening as they realized the gravity of the situation. "These aren't just drugs," one officer said, holding up a small vial filled with a clear liquid. This looks like a chemical agent." Sean's pulse quickened. The realization hit him like a slap in the face. What they had uncovered wasn't just a simple drug smuggling operation. It was far worse. The woman had been carrying a substance that, if released, could cause mass chaos, even death. These chemicals weren't just dangerous. They were designed to be lethal. "Get hazmat down here," Sean ordered, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "And get the containment teams ready. This could be bigger than we thought." The officers moved quickly, their training kicking in as they prepared for the next steps. Sean's eyes never left the vials in the officers' hands, a deep sense of dread settling in his chest. These chemicals weren't meant to be smuggled for simple trafficking. They were part of something far more catastrophic. This wasn't just about profit. It was about destruction. The woman, still trembling, stood silently as she watched the officers work. She was no longer pleading. The reality of what she had been involved in had set in. Sean felt a moment of pity for her, but it was quickly overridden by the knowledge that they were dealing with something that could hurt far more people than just her. The danger was far from over. As the officers continued to inspect the contents of the bag, Jet's growls grew louder, more urgent. The dog's body was still taut, his eyes fixed on the bag with an intensity that Sean knew wasn't about to let up. Jet's instincts were still telling them something they hadn't fully realized yet. There was more to uncover. Suddenly, a sharp hiss filled the air, followed by a faint but unmistakable smell, chemical and sharp. Sean's heart stopped for a split second as he realized what was happening. The chemicals inside the vials had started to react, a slight leakage occurring as the pressure within the containers began to build. "No," Sean muttered under his breath. "Not now." He turned to the officers. "Get the evacuation plan in motion now. Clear the area and get everyone out." The sound of the alarm blared throughout the terminal, loud and jarring. People turned, looking around in confusion as the emergency sirens echoed through the building. Passengers rushed toward the exits, while the security team scrambled to guide them to safety. Sean moved swiftly, his hand on Jet's leash, as he ran toward the woman. "We need to move now," Sean shouted to her, his voice firm. The woman, still in shock, hesitated for a moment before she nodded and started walking quickly with the officers. But Sean knew they didn't have much time. The chemical leak was getting worse, and if they didn't contain it fast, the entire terminal could be at risk. Sean's mind raced. The clock was ticking and the stakes had just gone through the roof. This wasn't just a routine bust. This was an emergency, a life-or-death situation. "Jet, stay with me," Sean said as he sprinted alongside his partner, his eyes scanning the terminal. The tension was so thick now, Sean could feel the pressure building with every second. Jet was at his side, moving with precision, his eyes scanning for any sign of further danger. As the hazmat teams arrived and began to assess the situation, Sean felt a deep sense of urgency take over. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. The danger wasn't just inside the vials. It was in every corner of the terminal, in every person still inside. The sirens blared their deafening wail, cutting through the terminal like a knife. Panic swept through the crowd as people looked around, unsure of what was happening. but the security team was already in action, moving quickly to organize an evacuation. Sean's mind was racing, every second feeling like a lifetime. The chemical leak was spreading fast, and every minute they wasted could be one more step closer to a full-scale disaster. "Move, move, move," Sean shouted, pushing past the crowd toward the exit. His hand was tight on Jet's leash as the dog trotted by his side, his focus unwavering. Jet's instincts had guided them this far, but now Sean had to rely on his own training to make the right call. The woman who had been caught in the smuggling operation was now being escorted by officers, her face pale and full of fear. But Sean didn't have time for her anymore. She was no longer the priority. The terminal was. The chemical danger was real, and people were still inside, unaware of the full extent of the threat. "Sean," one of the officers called out to him, waving him over. "We've got the hazmat team on the way, but we need to clear the area and identify the source of the leak. We've only got minutes." Sean nodded, his face hard with determination. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he had a job to do. This was no longer a routine bust. This was an emergency, and it was up to him and the team to contain it. Get the evac teams to the West Wing and start moving people out. Sean ordered, his voice sharp. "I need all the security personnel to coordinate with the hazmat team. We don't know how far this has spread yet, but we have to assume the worst." As the team sprang into action, Sean glanced over at Jet, who had now stopped walking. The dog's nose was twitching, and his eyes scanned the area with precision. He wasn't just looking for danger, he was feeling it. The tension in the air was palpable. Jet's sharp instincts had gotten them this far, and Sean trusted that they would guide them through this next phase. "Stay alert, Jet." Sean muttered, his heart pounding in his chest. The danger wasn't just in the leak. It was in the fact that they didn't know where it was coming from. The entire terminal could be affected, and they needed to act quickly before the chemical spread further. The officers moved into position, coordinating the evacuation and clearing the area around the suspected leak. Sean could hear the distant hum of the hazmat team's equipment as they began their work. Every minute counted. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Sean turned to another officer who was overseeing the evacuation. "We need to find the source, and we need to do it now. Keep the crowd moving, but don't let anyone get too close to the suspected area." "We're on the clock." The officer nodded, taking off to manage the crowd, while Sean moved to a safer position where he could oversee the operation. The smell of chemicals was faint but unmistakable, lingering in the air like a bad omen. Jet stood beside him, still on alert, his body tense. Sean looked down at his partner, knowing that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The sense of urgency was overwhelming, but there was no room for fear. Not now. Not when so many lives were at stake. "Jet, find it," Sean ordered, his voice firm. Jet turned his head, focusing on the scent in the air, his nose twitching with determination. They needed to track down the source of the leak, and time was running out. The security team and hazmat experts would do their part, but this was still in their hands. The terminal was filled with the chaos of evacuation, the blaring alarms amplifying the sense of urgency. Sean's eyes were fixed on Jet, watching as his partner's nose twitched with intensity. The dog's body was tense, every muscle coiled, ready to spring into action. Together, they had to find the source of the chemical leak. And fast. The clock was ticking. Jet's sniffing grew more frantic as they moved through the terminal, his head swinging from side to side. The faint but unmistakable smell of chemicals was still lingering in the air, a constant reminder that time was running out. Every second they wasted could mean more lives in danger. "Jet, find it." Sean ordered, his voice steady despite the pressure mounting in his chest. He knew that Jet had the training, the instinct to lead them to the source. If there was anyone who could find it, it was him. Jet took off at a swift pace, his paws moving over the smooth floor as he tracked the scent. Sean followed closely behind his eyes, scanning the crowd for any sign of danger. The evacuation was moving at a good pace, but not fast enough. They had to make sure the area around the leak was completely cleared. He couldn't afford any distractions. Sean's mind raced as he considered the worst-case scenario. A chemical leak like this, if left unchecked, could cause an outbreak of toxic fumes, putting hundreds of innocent people in harm's way. But they weren't going to let that happen. Not on their watch. Jet led him to the far side of the terminal, where the source of the leak seemed to be concentrated. Sean's eyes narrowed as he followed the dog's every move. Jet's nose twitched in the air, and then with one swift motion, he stopped in front of a small utility closet near the back wall. The scent was stronger here. There was no mistaking it now. Here, Sean said to the officers around him, pointing toward the closet. The hazmat team was already on their way, but Sean didn't want to wait. Not now. The officers moved quickly, securing the area, and Sean approached the closet cautiously. Jet stood by his side, his body still on high alert, eyes fixed on the door. The tension in the air was thick every second that passed, feeling like an eternity. Sean turned to the hazmat team that had arrived, giving them a nod. "We need this contained now," he said. The team moved into action, preparing their gear and rushing to the closet. Sean could see the urgency in their movements. The leak needed to be stopped before it spread further. As the hazmat team worked quickly to contain the source, Jet remained by Sean's side, still alert, watching the team's every move. It was clear that the dog wasn't just a companion. He was a key part of this operation. Without Jet's ability to detect the chemical leak, they never would have found the source in time. Minutes felt like hours, but the hazmat team was able to successfully seal the leak and neutralize the chemical. The terminal was safe for now. The immediate threat had been contained. "Good boy, Jet," Sean murmured, his voice filled with quiet pride. The dog turned his head, acknowledging his handler's praise, though there was no time for rest. There were still hundreds of people to evacuate, and Sean knew that the work wasn't over. Sean turned back to the woman who had been escorted away from the chaos, her face pale but relieved. She hadn't been the source of the danger, but her involvement in the smuggling operation had led them to it. Now they needed to find out who was behind this, and why. As the hazmat team continued to monitor the situation, Sean looked down at Jet, who was still standing by his side, his focus unwavering. The dog had saved countless lives today, and Sean knew that without him, this whole situation could have ended much differently. "Let's get to the bottom of this, Jet," Sean said quietly, his voice full of resolve. They had a long road ahead of them, but together they would uncover the truth. The air in the terminal had finally begun to settle, the frantic tension slowly giving way to a strange stillness. The evacuation was well under control, and the chemical leak had been neutralized, but the questions surrounding the woman remained. Sean couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to her story. She wasn't just a smuggler. There was something deeper, something that had led her to make the choices she had. The woman sat on a bench near the security office, her face pale and drawn. Her hands shook slightly, her eyes darting around nervously as if she expected someone to rush in and pull her away. The officers had secured the area, but Sean still kept a close eye on her. His job wasn't done until they had answers. "Come on, let's talk," Sean said, his voice calm but firm, as he approached her. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please don't make me go back there. I didn't want any of this. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Sean's heart twisted. He had seen people make bad choices, even criminals trying to justify their actions. But there was something in the woman's voice, a genuine sorrow, that made him pause. He knew she had been caught up in something much larger than she could control. "I'm listening," Sean said softly, sitting down beside her. He had been through countless high-stakes situations, but this was different. The woman's fear felt real, and it gnawed at him. The truth had to come out, and he was the one who would get it. The woman's hands trembled as she spoke. I never wanted to be a part of this." She started, her voice breaking. "But they threatened my son. They showed me pictures of him, said if I didn't do what they asked, they'd hurt him. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I just followed their orders, it would be over. But it's only gotten worse." Sean's jaw tightened as he listened, but he said nothing. Her story was starting to make sense. The pressure of being coerced into a life of crime, especially when it involved someone's family, was a kind of desperation Sean knew all too well. But that didn't make her actions any less dangerous. "I was just supposed to carry it, just keep quiet and get on the flight. They gave me a fake ID, a new passport. They said I'd be paid well, that my son would be taken care of. But when I saw what was in the package, I couldn't do it anymore." She continued, her voice trembling. "I tried to back out, but it was too late. They said they'd kill him if I didn't follow through." Sean's mind raced. He understood the desperation in her voice. He knew the kind of fear that could make a person do unspeakable things. But still, she had made the choice to become part of the operation. She had to be held accountable for that. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I thought I was just helping. But now I see what they've made me a part of." Sean looked at her, his eyes hardening. "You made a choice too. You could have said no. You didn't, and that's why we're here. But I understand. You were manipulated, threatened. That's no excuse for what you did, but I understand the position you were put in." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but Sean didn't flinch. He had been in this job long enough to know that empathy didn't mean forgiveness. She had played a part in a much larger operation, and now they had to dismantle it. "You're not a victim here," Sean said, his voice steady. "You were part of a criminal network, and that makes you dangerous. But you've given us what we need. The real criminals, Victor, the network, are who we need to focus on now. You're going to help us bring them down." The woman nodded, wiping the tears from her face. She was a broken woman caught in a web of fear, but the truth had been revealed. Now the focus was on bringing those who had manipulated her to justice. Sean stood, his thoughts still churning. He felt for the woman, but his responsibility was to stop the criminal network. And with what she had given him, the pieces were finally coming together. As Sean stood there, his mind racing, he couldn't help but feel the gravity of the situation. What had started as a routine day had now led to the discovery of a vast criminal operation, one that spanned borders, exploited vulnerable people, and threatened countless lives. The woman, still seated with her face hidden behind trembling hands, had just provided the most critical piece of information: Victor, the man behind it all. The realization settled heavy in the air. Victor wasn't just a small-time player. He was the mastermind orchestrating a trafficking ring that manipulated people like the woman sitting in front of him. Women who had no choice but to participate or risk the safety of their families. "Tell me everything," Sean said again, his voice now gentle but firm, pulling the woman back into the conversation. "How does this network work? Who else is involved?" The woman looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. She took a shaky breath before speaking, each word laced with the weight of a story too horrible to ignore. They've been doing this for years. It's not just a one-off. They bring women in from all over. Most of them are like me, refugees, single mothers, anyone who looks vulnerable enough to be coerced. She began, her voice quiet, but growing in conviction as she spoke. Victor runs everything from behind the scenes. His company, the one that ships medical supplies, that's just a front. They use it to smuggle drugs, high-grade narcotics, the kind that would never pass a normal inspection. Women like me, they tell us to get pregnant, or they give us these prosthetic bellies. They make us carry it across borders, bypassing security, all while we think we're just helping with harmless deliveries. Sean felt the familiar chill of realization run through him. The operation was worse than he'd thought. It wasn't just a drug smuggling scheme. It was an entire network of exploitation. One that used the vulnerable as pawns in a much more dangerous game. They tell us it's just medical supplies, drugs disguised as life-saving materials. They've even hired doctors to make it look real. We're forced to go through checkpoints like normal passengers, but those prosthetic bellies hide the drugs. The woman's eyes flitted nervously to Sean, as if she could hardly believe what she was confessing. Sean's fist clenched. The complexity of the operation hit him harder now. It was more than just drugs. It was the exploitation of people desperate enough to believe they had no choice. Victor wasn't just smuggling drugs. He was trafficking human lives, using women like pawns in his elaborate scheme. The prosthetics, the fake pregnancies, everything was carefully planned to evade detection. Where do they ship it? Who else is involved? Sean pressed, his urgency rising, as he knew they were on the edge of cracking the whole operation wide open. They ship all over, she answered quickly. The women take the packages from one airport to another, to different cities, countries, places where they think we won't be caught. And Victor, he has people in every city, every airport. He controls the whole thing, pays off the right people to keep things quiet. Sean let out a low breath, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just a couple of rogue agents smuggling drugs. This was a well-established criminal syndicate operating on a global scale, manipulating vulnerable women to carry out their dirty work. The scale of it was staggering. The woman looked down at her hands, guilt consuming her. I never thought it would be like this. They promised me my son would be safe. I didn't know they were involved in something this big, until I saw it for myself. Sean paused, his eyes softening. He had seen criminals justify their actions 100 times before, but there was something different about her. She wasn't an experienced smuggler or a willing accomplice. She was someone who had been manipulated, someone who had been forced into a role she couldn't escape from. You've done the right thing by telling us this, Sean said quietly. But it's time to bring the whole thing down. The woman nodded, tears welling up again, but this time they were different, ones of relief. She had told her story, and now the pieces were starting to fit together. The operation wasn't just about smuggling drugs. It was part of a broader network of human trafficking hiding in plain sight. Sean turned to the officers, his expression hardening. We need to bring in everyone involved, starting with Victor. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but Sean knew they were only scratching the surface. The woman had given them valuable information, but the full extent of the criminal operation was still hidden beneath layers of deception and secrecy. The network they were dealing with wasn't just limited to one airport or a single trafficking ring. It stretched across borders, connected through underground channels that could take months to untangle. Sean's mind raced as he processed the details they had uncovered. Victor, the mastermind, was still out there, and the web of his operation was vast. It wasn't just drugs being smuggled anymore. It was lives. The prosthetic bellies, the fake pregnancies, the manipulation of women into becoming unwitting couriers. The complexity of the scheme was unlike anything Sean had ever encountered. This wasn't just about narcotics. It was about power control and exploitation. and it had been going on for far longer than anyone realized. "Get the intel from Interpol," Sean ordered, his voice steady as he addressed the team. "We need to know everything about Victor and his connections. The woman mentioned other players, and I have a feeling we're looking at a much bigger picture." The officers nodded, moving quickly to gather the necessary information. But Sean wasn't just relying on official channels. He knew that time was of the essence. Victor wouldn't sit idly by as they pieced together his empire. The sooner they acted, the better. As the investigation deepened, Sean and his team uncovered more names tied to Victor's operation. Individuals who facilitated the smuggling, people who moved the goods, and others who kept the entire operation running smoothly behind the scenes. It wasn't just a few rogue criminals. It was a network that stretched across multiple countries, using legitimate businesses as fronts for their illegal activities. Sean's thoughts turned back to the woman they had detained. Her story was tragic, but it was just one of many. She had been forced into the network, but what about the others? How many women had been manipulated, forced into carrying these dangerous substances under threat of violence? The more Sean learned, the more it became clear that the scope of this investigation was far greater than they had originally thought. Victor was not just a small-time criminal. He was part of an international syndicate, and every day they delayed was another day that this network could continue to harm innocent people. The officers worked tirelessly, pulling data, analyzing connections, and tracing the money behind the operation. Sean's focus never wavered. He knew they were getting closer. But the weight of the case was pressing down on him. Each new lead they uncovered only added to the magnitude of the task ahead. But amidst the chaos, there was still a glimmer of hope. With Jet's help, they had already taken down one part of the network. They were getting closer to Victor, and once they found him, everything would come crashing down. But for now, they needed to dig deeper to follow the trail wherever it led. "Let's keep moving," Sean muttered to himself, his resolve hardening. They were getting closer to the truth, but the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. He couldn't afford to stop now, not when there was so much at stake. The investigation was in full swing. But amidst the chaos and the urgency of the larger case, Sean couldn't forget about the woman they had detained. She was the key to the whole operation. Her testimony, her involvement in the trafficking ring, and her unfortunate role in a much bigger criminal scheme. But now, with the investigation in motion, it was time to turn the page on her story. The woman, still visibly shaken from the events that had unfolded, was sitting quietly in a secure room. She had been given the protection she needed, but there was still a heavy cloud of guilt and fear hanging over her. The officers had already briefed her on what would happen next. She wasn't facing immediate charges, at least not right away. But her future was uncertain. "Your cooperation has been invaluable," Sean said, sitting across from her. His voice was firm, but there was a trace of empathy beneath it. "But we still need to go through the legal process. There's still a lot to figure out." The woman nodded slowly, her eyes focused on her hands. She hadn't said much in the last few hours, her mind processing the events she had been forced into. The network had used her as a pawn, and now that the truth had come to light, she was left with the consequences of her actions. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I just wanted my son to be safe. They threatened him. I thought it would all be over if I just did what they told me." Sean sighed, leaning forward. He understood the desperation that had led her down this path, but he couldn't fully absolve her. She had made the choice to participate, and now there was no turning back. The law had to take its course. "You've done the right thing by helping us, and I know you didn't want to hurt anyone," Sean said, his tone softening. "But you're still going to have to face the consequences of your actions. We can help you, but we can't protect you from everything. This network is big, and it's only a matter of time before those responsible face justice. The woman's face twisted with guilt, her tears falling silently. She had been caught in a web of fear, but that didn't change the fact that she had played a role in the trafficking ring. "I understand," she said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to make sure my son is safe. I just want to keep him safe." Sean nodded. "We'll make sure your family is protected," he reassured her. "But for now, the most important thing is that we bring down the rest of this network. You've given us the lead we needed. We'll take it from here." With that, Sean stood his resolve firm. He knew the woman wasn't a villain, but she wasn't innocent either. Still, he had to give her credit. She had helped them uncover the operation, and in doing so, had given them the chance to dismantle the criminal network that had been operating in the shadows for so long. As the officers began to escort the woman to a secure location where she would receive protection, Sean turned away for a moment, his mind still focused on the larger task ahead. The criminal network was still out there, and Victor, the mastermind, was still a threat. The woman's story was over, but the investigation was far from finished. Sean looked down at Jet, who had been quietly sitting by his side throughout the conversation. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on him, alert as ever, sensing the next steps in the investigation. Sean could feel the weight of everything that was still to come, but with Jet by his side, he knew they would face it together. As the chaos of the operation began to settle, Sean couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride, but not for himself. It was for Jet. The German Shepherd had been more than just a partner. He had been the key to cracking the case wide open. Without Jet's instincts, without his incredible nose and determination, they would never have uncovered the full scope of the smuggling operation. Sean stood by the secured area where Jet sat patiently, the dog's amber eyes still scanning their surroundings, alert as ever. The people around them were beginning to recognize just how instrumental Jet had been in stopping a disaster. It wasn't just a routine bust or another case to file away. This was a dangerous, life-threatening scheme that could have caused untold harm. But thanks to Jet, the whole network was on the verge of being brought to its knees. "Jet did it again," one of the officers commented, his voice filled with admiration as he watched the dog. "You know, I've worked with canines for years, but I've never seen anything like this. The way he zeroed in on that woman. It's like he knew exactly what was happening before we did." Sean nodded, a soft smile playing on his lips. "He's more than just a canine. He's family." Jet's ears flicked at the sound of Sean's voice, and for a moment the dog's eyes softened, a subtle acknowledgement of the praise. His focus remained sharp, but there was a calmness in his demeanor now that the immediate danger had passed. "Not just a dog," another officer added with a chuckle. "More like a hero." The words echoed through Sean's mind. Hero. He had never been one for the spotlight, but he couldn't deny the truth of it. Jet had done something extraordinary that day. In his quiet, loyal way, he had saved lives, detected the threat, and given them the chance to stop it before it could escalate. The hazmat teams had done their job. The leak was contained, and the woman was safely in protective custody. But it was Jet's tireless determination that had allowed them to make it in time. Without his incredible senses, they would never have known where to look, and the chemical threat would have spread far beyond the terminal. People could have been exposed. The repercussions could have been catastrophic. Sean crouched beside Jet, running his hand through the dog's fur, the gesture both reassuring and affectionate. "You did it, boy," Sean said quietly, his voice filled with pride. Jet's tail wagged once slowly, as if to acknowledge his handler's words. He wasn't looking for recognition, and he wasn't interested in fame. Jet had done his job, and for him that was enough. In the following hours, Jet's role in the operation became the talk of the precinct. His actions were celebrated not just by Sean, but by everyone involved. The K9 unit had always been integral to the police force, but Jet had taken it to a new level. He had proven that there was more to a police dog than just following orders. There was instinct loyalty and a bond with his handler that could not be replicated. "Sean, we need to send out a press release," the chief said later, as the investigation began to wind down. "We've got to let the public know about Jet. People need to see how crucial he was in stopping this operation. He's not just a dog. He's a hero." Sean looked down at Jet, whose focus was still unwavering as they walked through the precinct. "He doesn't need the attention," Sean replied, a smile tugging at his lips. "But I'm proud of him. He's the real hero here." As they made their way out of the precinct, Jet walked beside Sean, his posture proud yet calm. The world may not have known it yet, but the true hero of the day was the German Shepherd who had made the ultimate difference. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. News outlets picked up the story of the heroic German Shepherd Jet, who had helped prevent a chemical disaster at the airport. Headlines splashed across screens everywhere, showcasing his incredible instincts and the partnership he shared with Sean. The once quiet precinct had turned into a hub of attention, with reporters constantly seeking out Sean and Jet for interviews, eager to learn about the dog who had saved lives. Jet's name became synonymous with bravery and loyalty. He was more than just a police dog now. He was a symbol of everything good in law enforcement. His image began to appear in news articles, social media posts, and even local news segments. Everywhere Sean went, people stopped to thank him and pat Jet, praising the dog's courage and instinct. The community had taken Jet to heart, and rightfully so. In a world often filled with uncertainty, Jet had stood as a beacon of hope. "It's amazing how quickly the story is spreading," one of the officers remarked as Sean and Jet sat together in the break room, catching their breath after another round of interviews. "You've always known how great he is, but now everyone else knows it too." Sean smiled, though it was clear that he wasn't entirely comfortable with the attention. "Jet doesn't need the spotlight. He did what he had to do, just like he always does." But as the days passed, Sean came to understand why the world needed to see the story. People wanted to believe in something good. Jet's bravery and loyalty had touched everyone who heard about it. In a time when the world seemed so chaotic and divided, Jet had shown people what it meant to act selflessly, to follow your instincts, and to stand by those who needed you the most. The local news ran special segments on Jet, celebrating his heroism. The public shared stories of their own dogs and how Jet's actions had inspired them. A growing wave of admiration swept over the K9 unit, and soon Jet became more than just a symbol for law enforcement. He was an emblem of courage and unconditional love. Sean couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he watched the positive impact Jet's story had on the community. People who had never even considered the role of police dogs were now looking at them with new respect. It wasn't just about the work they did. It was about the deep bond they shared with their handlers, the unspoken understanding between them. Jet's story was shared far and wide, and with each retelling, more and more people found themselves inspired. The loyalty and sacrifice of a dog in many ways served as a reminder to people about the importance of being there for one another, of putting others first, and of acting in the face of danger without hesitation. As the recognition grew, Sean and Jet became something of local legends. The city held a small ceremony in Jet's honor, where he was awarded a special commendation for his bravery. It wasn't much, just a small plaque, but to Sean, it meant the world. "Good boy," Jet Sean whispered as he placed a hand on his partner's head. "You deserve every bit of this." The news coverage wasn't just a moment of glory. It became a turning point for Jet, his work, and the K9 unit as a whole. It wasn't just about doing a job. It was about making a difference in the world. The ceremony was held in the heart of the city, just outside the police precinct, where Sean and Jet had spent so many long hours together. It was a simple affair. but the significance was enormous. The community gathered, local news stations lined the streets, and there was a palpable sense of admiration in the air. Sean had never been one for public attention, but today, he wasn't the focus. It was Jet who was being honored. It was his loyalty, his quick thinking, and his incredible instincts that had saved so many lives. Jet stood beside Sean, his posture straight and proud. His eyes, as always, were alert, scanning the crowd with an intensity that never seemed to waver, even in moments of praise. The small plaque they were about to receive was a token of gratitude from the city, a symbol of what Jet had done not just for the police force, but for the entire community. On behalf of the city and the K9 unit, the mayor said, standing at the podium with a broad smile, "We are proud to present this commendation to Jet for his exceptional bravery in helping to prevent a chemical disaster and stopping a dangerous criminal network. Your actions exemplify everything this community stands for: courage, loyalty, and the willingness to put others first, no matter the cost." Sean watched as the mayor carefully placed the plaque in front of Jet, who stood with a proud yet calm demeanor. The dog's gaze softened for a moment, as if understanding the weight of the ceremony. A round of applause rippled through the crowd, and for a moment time seemed to slow. Jet had always been a hero in Sean's eyes, but now the rest of the world was finally recognizing it. Sean stepped forward, placing a hand on Jet's back. "Good boy, Jet," he whispered, his voice filled with affection. The dog's tail gave a small wag in response, and Sean couldn't help but smile. The ceremony may have been short, but the recognition meant more to him than anything. It wasn't just a plaque. It was a testament to everything Jet had done, to the bond they shared, and to the lives they had saved together. After the ceremony, people approached Sean and Jet, offering their congratulations. The media was all around them, snapping photos and asking questions. Sean felt a small pang of discomfort. He wasn't used to the limelight. But as the recognition poured in, he realized something important. This wasn't about the fame or the accolades. It was about the impact Jet had made. It was about the lives they had protected, the work they had done, and the partnership they shared. As the crowd slowly dispersed and the ceremony ended, Sean and Jet were left standing together side by side. The city had recognized Jet for his courage and dedication, but Sean knew that this was just the beginning. This moment, this recognition, was not an end. It was a new chapter in their journey. Jet turned his head and looked up at Sean, his amber eyes filled with the same loyalty and determination that had carried them through so many trials. Sean knew that no matter where their path took them next, Jet would always be by his side, ready to face whatever came their way. As the last of the reporters packed up and the crowd began to thin, Sean and Jet stood in the quiet aftermath of the ceremony. The applause and praise had faded, and now it was just the two of them, side by side, alone in their thoughts. The recognition was over, but the journey they had taken was far from complete. Sean looked down at Jet, the dog's tail still swaying gently, his amber eyes full of calm and understanding. There was no need for words between them. They both knew the depth of what had been accomplished, how far they had come, how much they had sacrificed, and what they had given to each other. But beyond the external accolades, there was a greater lesson that resonated within Sean. It was the lesson of loyalty, the kind that went beyond duty, beyond training, beyond the badge they both wore. Jet's loyalty had saved countless lives. It wasn't just the chemical leak at the airport or the smuggling operation they had uncovered. It was every moment before that, every time Jet had followed his instincts, every time he had been by Sean's side, ready to leap into action without question. Loyalty was the foundation of their partnership, an unspoken bond that had seen them through the toughest moments, both on duty and off. Jet had taught Sean that loyalty wasn't always about grand gestures or heroic moments. It was about consistency. It was about showing up every day, doing what was needed without hesitation, and standing firm even when things were uncertain. It was about protecting others even when it was difficult, even when you didn't fully understand the reason why. Sean couldn't help but reflect on the times when he had been frustrated with his own limitations. When the weight of the job had worn him down, when the constant threat of danger had made him question his choices. But Jet had never wavered. The dog was always there no matter what, with unwavering trust and a quiet strength that kept them both moving forward. And now, as the world outside celebrated Jet's heroism, Sean knew that the lesson had extended far beyond the two of them. Loyalty wasn't just a value for law enforcement or K-9 units. It was a value for society as a whole. It was about standing by those in need, supporting each other in the toughest times, and doing what was right, even when it was hard. Sean smiled to himself, a small knowing smile. The world was full of noise and chaos, but the real power lay in the quiet moments of loyalty, moments like the one he was sharing with Jet. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't about awards or recognition. It was about the silent promise they had made to each other from day one, to always protect, always serve, and always be there, no matter what. "You've taught me a lot, haven't you?" "Jet." Sean murmured the words barely audible. Jet turned to him, giving a small wag of his tail in acknowledgement. There was nothing more to say. The message was clear. Loyalty, sacrifice, and love were the true measures of success. And Sean had learned that lesson not from a person, but from a dog. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the empty precinct parking lot, Sean and Jet began to walk together. Their pace steady, their bond unbreakable. The days following the ceremony were filled with the usual rhythm of work, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. Sean and Jet continued their patrols, their routines unchanged, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now. The world had recognized Jet's heroism, but for Sean and Jet, it was just another day on the job. As Sean walked through the precinct, he could feel the weight of the appreciation from his colleagues and the community. There were nods of recognition, smiles of gratitude, and more than a few heartfelt thank yous directed at Jet. The dog, ever humble, took it all in stride, his amber eyes still sharp, his focus unshaken. But to Sean, all the praise and attention didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet bond they shared, the unbreakable connection that had been forged through years of partnership. "Ready for another day, partner?" Sean asked as he looked down at Jet, who had his head tilted slightly, as if in response to the question. It was as if Jet knew that the work was never truly done. There were always new challenges, new dangers lurking, and new lives to protect. They headed out into the city, the early morning light filtering through the streets as the city slowly began to wake up. The hum of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, and the distant sound of a siren created a familiar backdrop to their day. Sean had learned to tune out the noise over the years. It was the steady presence of Jet by his side that kept him grounded, that reminded him of the real reason they were out here. The rest of the world might have moved on, from the sensational headlines and the media circus surrounding Jet's heroics, but Sean and Jet were focused on what lay ahead. They didn't need accolades or recognition. They needed each other. And together, they made a difference every single day. As they patrolled the streets, Sean couldn't help but reflect on the lesson that had been so clearly taught to him. It wasn't just about the big moments of heroism. It was about showing up every day, doing the work, and doing it with integrity. It was about the quiet moments, the ones that often went unnoticed, that made the real difference. And in those moments, Jet was always there. Loyal, strong, and ready for whatever came next. In the distance, Sean spotted a car pulled over to the side of the road, the driver looking anxious. Without hesitation, he gave Jet a soft command. The dog's tail wagged once, and they made their way over, ready to assist. It was just another day, just another routine call. But Sean felt a deep sense of purpose in his chest. This was where they belonged. This was their mission. As they approached the car, the driver looked up and visibly relaxed upon seeing Sean and Jet. It wasn't just the uniform. It was the unwavering trust that people had in Jet's instincts and Sean's ability to get the job done. They didn't need the spotlight. They didn't need praise. They just needed to be there when it counted. "Everything all right?" Sean asked as he knelt next to the car. The driver nodded, a nervous smile creeping across his face. "Yeah, just a flat tire. I didn't know who else to call." Sean gave a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, we've got you covered." Jet, ever the professional, sat by Sean's side, alert but calm, as if ready to step in if needed. Together they worked quickly, getting the driver back on his way. It was just another small moment in a day of service. But to Sean, it was a reminder of why they did this. It wasn't about the accolades or the attention. It was about the quiet moments of connection and service, the moments when they could make someone's day a little bit easier. As they finished and the driver drove off, Sean stood looking down at Jet. "We did good today, boy." Jet's tail wagged once more, and Sean smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The world had moved on, but their work wasn't done. It never would be. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to serve, and new people to protect. But no matter what, Sean and Jet would face it together. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sean and Jet walked side by side, the bond between them stronger than ever. A new day had begun, and with it came new missions, new stories to tell, and more lives to touch. Together they would continue to serve, continue to protect, and continue to make a difference. Because for them, it wasn't just a job. It was a calling. As the story of Jet the German Shepherd unfolds, it becomes clear that his actions transcend those of a typical police dog. His loyalty, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to serving and protecting are not only what make him an extraordinary partner to Sean, but also a symbol of the deep bond that can exist between humans and animals. Through his bravery, Jet reminds us of the profound impact that animals, especially dogs, have on our lives. Whether as companions, protectors, or healers. The German Shepherd, a breed known for its intelligence, loyalty, and courage, stands as a testament to the incredible potential within all animals. Jet's story is not just about his role in law enforcement. It's about the love and trust that we share with animals and the lessons they teach us about responsibility, resilience, and compassion. Their loyalty isn't bound by words or rewards. It's inherent, pure, and steadfast. In the end, this story is more than just a tale of crime fighting and heroism. It's a reminder of the value of loyalty, the importance of protecting others, and the power of love, whether human or animal. The bond between Sean and Jet highlights the deep connection we can form with animals, and it's a call to recognize and honor that relationship, not just as a benefit to ourselves, but as a gift to the world. Jet's heroism serves as a powerful message that love, loyalty, and sacrifice are values worth celebrating, and that animals, especially German Shepherds, have the unique ability to inspire us to be better, kinder, and more courageous. Their presence in our lives is a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes wear paws, not capes.